Hello, and welcome to another episode of More D&I Discussions, a series of conversations with C-suite executives who share their candid insight into many of the important aspects of creating and advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion principles and practices in their organizations. I am Marlon Moore, president of Marlon Moore Consulting, and thank you for joining us. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Mark Delahanty, the president and CEO of Bob Evans Farms, the leading producer and distributor of refrigerated potato and pasta-based side dishes and pork sausage and egg products. And I want to just take a moment to say here, Mark, I really enjoy your mashed potatoes. And recently, I had the macaroni and cheese, and it was a really great dish to go with some of my chicken, pot roasts, and other good stuff. But just to share a little bit, you all, about Mark's background, which is very accomplished. Mark has a demonstrated track record of building branded portfolios and driving profitability, and is well known for his customer collaboration. Prior to joining Bob Evans Farms, Mark was the chief operating officer for Post Consumer Brands, the fastest growing cereal company in the United States. Before joining the corporate sector, Mark served for 7 years in the United States Navy as a submarine officer aboard USS Pennsylvania and in Washington, D.C. He earned his undergraduate degree from the United States Naval Academy and has an MBA from the Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota. First and foremost, Mark, thank you for your service and thank you for taking time to join more D&I discussions. How are you today?
I'm doing great, and thank you for that terrific introduction. It's just a pleasure to have the opportunity to be here with you today. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you for taking time to join us. Mark, I like to start these discussions off with a very kind of simple question, and I've asked all of my guests this question. Why is diversity, equity, and inclusion important to you personally?
Sure. Well, it's important to me, I'll start first on a personal level and as a leader. I feel strongly that not only is advocating for a strong DE&I strategy the right thing to do, but it really helps strengthen the culture and improve the overall company performance. As a company, we constantly demonstrate through both challenge and opportunity, of which there's been a lot in the last few years, that significant benefit comes through the diversity of thinking and diversity of approach. That thinking and approach comes from having those different diverse backgrounds and experience that need to be present in the organization and need to be heard in order to maximize the potential for the company.
So Mark, I've had the fortune and pleasure of knowing you for a bit of time and really enjoyed the conversation that we've had. But I'd like to go a little bit deeper. I've seen you in your organization, and I can feel your passion when you talk about this work and your commitment for this work. I just wonder if there was a moment that you've had in your career or your life that really kind of made you say, you know what, I'm going to get behind this in a deeper way.
Yeah, well, I've had the opportunity to work again in a variety of organizations and a variety of capacities. So starting first with my military career, and then a number of different companies and categories throughout corporate America. And I think in all of those experiences, I've seen the good side of things, and in some cases better. But I've also seen areas where there's a lot more opportunity. I've been a part of an organization that hasn't embraced diversity, and specifically, it was an industry where it was, male dominated, and using that as an example, and having spent a couple of years in that organization, and in contrast to others, I wanted, you could just see how the thinking was more limited, how the culture was shaped not for the better, in terms of a male-dominated and almost exclusive culture. And it was then and there that I think the first time I really got to appreciate the contrast, since my military experience had represented more diversity than I experienced in that particular role. And I think seeing that difference really sparked, my interest in ensuring that, well, one, committing to change, and then two, just recognizing the benefit of having, starting first with greater diversity, and then of course, equity inclusion to go along with it.
That's excellent. I mean, I think you really again get to the core of why this work matters. How do we leverage diversity, equity, inclusion to build a good culture, an inclusive culture, driving performance. But more in particular, what I appreciate about what you're saying is just kind of going through your lived experiences, whether it's through your military background or other job environments where you recognize that focusing on this work makes you a better organization, makes us better people. And so you've incorporated that into the way you lead. So I think that's awesome.
Right.
So with all of that and your experiences, what do you see as some of the challenges? Oftentimes, we talk about the wins and the things that go well, but we don't really hear the deep insights into what individuals and leaders like yourself view or see as challenges for advancing.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a great question. I think, there are two challenges that come immediately to mind. I think the first one is understanding and acknowledging that the commitment to change, specifically in the DE&I space, needs to start at the top. It needs to start with the leadership and specifically the leader of the organization. I think that's incredibly important if you're, seeking to make change and get traction of this magnitude. I think the other challenge is recognizing that while change takes time, and D&I is efforts are not just critical to the long term, but they have an immediate near term effect on the health and I would say potential of your company, meaning you really need to approach it with a sense of urgency when it comes to making change, and then be prepared to stick with your practices, your policies, your structures, et cetera, that help aid in that over time.
That's a great point. I love that, the sense of urgency. And you're right. I mean, this is a journey. Okay. So, often programs or strategies can take 3 to 5 years to truly evolve. But if your culture doesn't, reinforce this daily, you lose good people, engagement and morale is low. And so I really appreciate that notion of, while it's a journey and you recognize that, there's some things that still need to be done today.
That's right. Thank you.
That's a great point. Oftentimes, I've been in this space for a very long time. One of the things that I've heard come up, and I'm gonna put this question directly to you, Mark. Certain diverse talent is hard to find. Any thoughts about that notion?
I've experienced it. I've heard it. I've heard it in the past couple of years. I've heard it in recent months, and my conclusion or point of view on the matter, and how I engage folks in this dialogue, is that statement itself is a byproduct of a flawed system. I really see this, that statement that certain diverse talent is hard to find, stemming from the fact that we as hiring managers, developers of diverse talent have insufficient networks, poor recruiting tools, tools that may carry unconscious biases out into the communities that we're trying to reach, that as an organization, we don't have explicit programs or even a specific commitment stated around our DE&I programming. And it has, all of that collectively has that compounding effect of making that search for diverse talent harder. What I would say is diverse talent is hard to find if you don't know where to look and how to make your company attractive. And that's part of the journey that we've been on together, really opening our organization up, hiring managers, human resources, all those involved in to what other sources are out there. And we've had some terrific wins. And occasionally, there are lessons learned where we could do better.
That's a great point. Certain diverse talent is hard to find if you don't know where to look. I think that's a very great point. And opening up our networks, right? We tend to network with people we know, we're comfortable with, but how do we put ourselves in position to meet new people?
Right.
And it's almost like the hiring process begins before you have an opening. So building a diverse network is important. I appreciate that. So I know you all recently reimagined and rolled out your company values. If you've had a set of company values before, but you sort of reimagined those and rolled those out. And we're very strategic in incorporating DE&I in that rollout. So what led to you all taking that approach, Mark, which I think was spot on. There has to be that value alignment. Mm-hmm. But what kind of led to you all taking such a strategic approach to your rollout?
Right. Well, I really appreciate that. First of all, our values rollout, the reason that we revamped and retooled our values were they were, had previously been more of a assumptive statement around who we were and less of a call to action in terms of the behaviors that we wanted to see that would ultimately define our culture and the type of company we're. So the way I think about our values is our values are the frame, if you will, of the house that we live and work in every day. And then DE&I is a big part of that foundation that we built our house upon. So without DE&I practices, policies, commitment, et cetera, the foundation would be very small with not a lot of room for growth. As I mentioned earlier, if we're not actively seeking out and listening to different perspectives, we're quickly becoming stagnant. We'll stop growing and find ourselves with more challenges than we can ultimately solve. I think it goes back to the previous question on certain talent being hard to find as well. We made a conscious decision to clearly state, promote, and live our DE&I strategy. That way it's as visible as our values. And again, not only the right thing to do, but it lets talent that may be interested in our company understand who we are, and it makes it a little bit easier for us to help engage in our communities.
That's a great approach. One of the things I've admired about your organization is the fact that you all you have your corporate office, but then you also have your manufacturing plants. Yeah. And from the very beginning, your operating plans, from the very beginning, you all were intentional in saying we don't want diversity, equity, and inclusion just to live in our corporate office. We have a broader set of team members that we need to bring into this. How has that approach, Mark, benefited your company, and what do you see as some of the ongoing opportunities?
Yeah, this is really exciting to talk about. First, you're exactly right. I mean, the reason our focus has been beyond the corporate office, the proverbial tip of the iceberg, 85% of our workforce is in our operating plants, manufacturing, warehousing, storing our food, and transportation. So if we exclude those that are making, moving, distributing our food, we'd be limited to about 15% of our employees. And of course, our efforts would be far less effective, including reaching out into the communities in which we serve. By extending our DE&I practices and efforts out in our plants, it's actually brought us immediate benefit in the last year and a half, where we were having challenges fully staffing out. A specific example here in Lima, Ohio, where as many operators were challenged in the pandemic environment, finding enough people to get all of the work done. we were able to, in the case of our Lima, Ohio facility, partner with a minority-owned staffing firm with a practice of strategically sourcing diverse talent. In this case, they were working with a large Creole population of employees located here in Ohio. We were able to hire 80 Creole workers. That's about 20% of our total workforce. These are folks that are English as a second language, naturally Creole speaking. We were able to hire in translators along with the employees, making it easier for them to onboard, understand and learn our process, and also promote engagement across the employee base. Because of our posture on DE&I, this was just an example to a lot of our employees in terms of our commitment behind our DE&I practices. So it was embraced by the employee base there at our Lima facility. It gave us an opportunity to do some cultural sensitivity training and really I would say reinforce our openness to change. And again, this has been just an absolutely terrific experience. The productivity, engagement of that plant is the highest it's been in its lifetime. Wow. And it really is a byproduct of the enhanced employee base that we've been able to bring together.
Wow, that's phenomenal. And listen, I mentioned this in the opening, and I'm going to say it again because I believe it. I've shared before, for me, I love pot roast. And on the weekends, usually on Sundays, when I get a chance to make it, I got to have some mashed potatoes to go with it. And I really appreciate your mashed potato products, as well as as I said, your macaroni and cheese. And so you got some really great things coming out your operating plan. So just again, shout out to you, Bob Evans Farms, for that. But let me get to a more a serious question that, I'll be honest, Mark, sometimes when I ask this question or I have these conversations, it pushes my comfort zone. And so I'm willing to do that right here with you now. And so in the D&I space, some non-minorities feel like diversity initiatives means replacing white males. Diversity initiatives means replacing white males. How would you respond to that idea?
Well, it's a good question. There's a lot of avenues to go down here. I think I'll say this. That perspective suggests that the diversity aspect of DE&I is a zero-sum game. I think if done correctly and fully embraced, having greater diversity, making sure that you have the equity inclusion aspects to go along with it, right, can lead to growth and opportunity for companies and all their employees. So again, it's that thinking is almost along the lines of a one-for-one trade out and a zero-sum game.
Great point.
And it's just not like that. I think, in general, and I, of course, fit, into that demographic. I mean, white males can become more engaged allies by actively working to bridge an understanding of unique perspectives, experiences, challenges. I know when we started our journey, it was first acknowledging that we had a lot to learn. And in order to learn, and promote that allyship, we need to do a lot of listening, listening to understand, listening to find ways in which to advocate for and partner with those that may not have that same level of access, and or where we've created a system that is blocking that potential.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning the importance of allyship in this journey. I think that's a really great construct. So Mark, what are some of the programs and activities that you all have instituted to promote your D&I efforts? Or said differently, what are some things that you're doing that you're excited about?
Sure. So there's a lot to be excited about, even considering we're relatively early, in our journey. Previously I talked about examples where from a recruiting talent sourcing standpoint, we're certainly acknowledging and working to improve our tools, expand our network, et cetera. But I think some of the in addition, some of the more exciting work comes from the fact that we have taken the time to establish a 24-month roadmap operating plan, back to making sure you have that sense of urgency, because while 24 months, couple years, long time, it has monthly, quarterly, progression that we're measuring there. That roadmap has us looking at workplace diversity, has us looking at culture impact, community impact, supplier diversity, which is oftentimes overlooked as maybe folks are a little more internal focused. And then you've mentioned a couple of times our mac and cheese, our mashed potatoes, but the Bob Evans Farms brand, our brand impact in terms of what we're advertising, how we're communicating, what we're projecting out there in the community. So we're early in our journey. We've begun building out initiatives. We have recently formed employee resource groups and inclusion councils across our network. They are formed not just at the corporate level, but it's really corporate, extending out to our site locations. In some cases, to get critical mass, we have engaged with other companies, within and within our network. And what we're doing there is we're bringing groups together for greater representation. They're helping us establish activities that further define and activate the DE&I initiatives. I think what's really exciting here, as we've stood those up, as we've suggested to people that we would like folks to be engaged, to volunteer, to help lead, the outpouring has been overwhelming. I mean, we have more, I won't want to say more interest than we can accommodate, so much interest that we've had the opportunity to accelerate and broaden the reach of a number of these groups to accommodate the outpouring, which is really, really encouraging, and I like to think, reflective of the type of culture and employee base that we have here. Finally, in addition, it's not just about the set of activities, but we have worked to really scorecard and outline the progress that we expect. I'm a big fan of expect what you inspect, and while we know we won't make the desired progress every time, and in some cases we'll exceed it, I think it's the way to really keep ourselves honest and make sure, going back to my earlier comment about that sense of urgency, that we're making steady progress and that the organization stays committed to our program.
That's phenomenal. You mentioned your strategic objectives, one being community impact. And I know we'll soon be approaching the holiday season. So I'm just curious, how does Bob Evans Farms plan to support diverse organizations and families across the communities you serve?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been a big supporter of the communities that we operate in, certainly here in Columbus, other locations that I'll mention here, and then we work to try to do some on a national level as well. And there's so much need out there, right? I mean, the past couple of years, more so than ever, and of course, given some of the headlines you see coming into the what's going to be the fall winter timeline and holiday season, I think there's going to be more need than ever. We work closely with the Mid-Ohio Food Collective. We make both food and financial donations there. Obviously, being a producer of food, it's an excellent opportunity for us to extend some of our production and make sure that the food banks are full well ahead and through the holidays and throughout the year as needs ebb and flow. We have similar partnerships that extend to communities in both Michigan, Texas, and Northern Ohio, where we also operate. We also have a number of nonprofits that we work to help cancer support community of Central Ohio. Lutheran Social Services, the MASH Pantry, United Schools Network, again, all representing, and working with families across our communities in a variety of need spaces. The partners that we look to work with are those that maximize, the impact and pass through to those that need it. And, while there's more, those are among some of the best that we work with.
That's excellent. And just want to give you all a shout out. I happen to be privy as a trustee of Central State University to know that you all have reached out to Central State, which is historically Black college and university, to really look at ways of supporting research opportunities, internship opportunities, and creating a pipeline of talent. Your Heroes to CEO, I believe I got that correct, Heroes to CEO
You're right.
program is really supportive of the veteran community. Again, sort of identifying these other dimensions of diversity. So just kudos to you all for continuing to live the work and not just talk about it in what you do. So Mark, as we begin to kind of wrap up here, before we do that, actually, I just reminded myself today is September 15th, which kicks off National Hispanic Heritage Month. So just want to give an acknowledgement to all of my listeners on this day, September 15th through October for the month. Mark and I want to take a moment to recognize that month. So I just thought I'd do that quick pause. But one of my last questions for you, Mark, is 20 years from now, what conversation do you hope we'll be having about diversity, equity, and inclusion?
20 years is a long time.
It goes by like that.
Although you know what, you took the words right out of my mouth as I said that. Although it goes by so fast, doesn't it?
That's right.
First, I would hope that the conversations we're having around DEI are different, very different than we're having today. I would hope that they're centered around the demonstrated benefit of DEI practices and improved performance. Less in terms, less around the gaps and opportunities that we have. That the conversations more about who we are and how we show it as a company, as a culture, as a community, than who we want to be. So we've made the kind of progress that we're celebrating, that we're showcasing, that has become, if you will, that standard practice. Again, 20 years, a long time, right? But it will go fast. I'd hope that we'd have the sort of diversity posture that's reflective of communities we operate in, and our equity and inclusion practices are better and best practices, right? Where folks have that seat at the table, where voices are heard and valued, but that is standard practice. It has just become part of the backbone and DNA of who we are. Said a little bit differently, that it's just more natural and takes less less effort and less practice, but acknowledging right now that's what it takes. But I'm hopeful we can get there a lot quicker than 20 years.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mark. So final question for you. What parting advice do you want to leave with other organizational leaders? I want to say C-suite, but I'm going to go broader than that. Just leaders that can help advance this work. What parting advice do you want to leave them today?
Sure thing, and thanks for asking that. And again, I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to talk about DEI and just here today, and the terrific partnership that we've had together as we've been on this journey. But as I think about parting advice, I think I'll go back and maybe just refer to a couple points that I've touched on already. One is that I think understanding that this is a top-down initiative. I have to show, I would say other leaders have to show their organization that they themselves and every member of the leadership team is behind DE&I initiatives. That every member doesn't just talk about it, but they live it, right? They live it in they don't just talk the talk, but they walk the walk. Also, that it won't just happen through talk and passion, that you have to put structures and practices in place to support the strategy. That way you can ensure that every level of the organization begins to understand it, begins to experience it, and begins to live it. And finally, just that don't be afraid to admit that you don't have the answers to the questions, that you may not fully understand it, and that you may have made or be making or even continue to make some mistakes. I think that acknowledgement and seeking the right partners, the right guides, the right allies in this is so important. I think that there's a hesitation sometimes on people's parts to acknowledge they feel they might feel embarrassed for where they are. They might feel embarrassed for what they don't know, or maybe the progress that or a lack of progress. I think just acknowledging that regardless of where you are, if you're willing to get better, when you go out and seek that help, that's largely what your organization, the communities, et cetera, are looking for, and they will be there for you. We've had nothing but a positive reception, so far in our efforts, even when we haven't gotten it 100% right.
Wow, that's powerful, Mark. I appreciate that and commend you for just modeling for all of us two inclusive behaviors, one which is humility, and then the other which is courage. So thank you, Mark, for all that you do to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in your organization, in your community. Today, we've been joined by Mark Delahanty, President and CEO of Bob Evans Farms, who's really provided some really great insight into the importance of leveraging diversity, equity, and inclusion to drive performance, to become stronger together as an organization. And we so appreciate having you on today's More D&I Discussions episode. Thank you for listening. Marlin Moore Consulting is a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy development firm helping organizations build their diversity strategy by providing them with resources to support their execution. For more information, visit marlinmore.com. And remember, diversity starts with you.